Good morning, Chris from Kirami UK here. And what I'm going to go through this morning is the MF250, which is connected to the air source heat pump. That pretty much runs on itself. However, what we need to do is weekly maintenance on the MF250 to make sure everything is running correctly. And this is how we're going to backwash the system to make sure the filter's clean. First thing we need to do is make sure all power is disconnected from the air source heat pump and the filter, which we'll do that now. With the power turned off, the first thing we need to do is turn the filter onto backwash. By depressing the handle, twisting around to backwash. And we're going to turn the power back on. And what I would normally do, I would run this for 30 to 45 seconds, cleaning out the filter. Once that's done, we're going to turn the power back off. And once we've done the backwash, what we need to do is depress the handle again with the power off, turn it on to rinse and turn the power back on. And we'll leave it on rinse for a further 15 seconds, and what that's going to do is compress all the media inside while continuing to get rid of any dirty water. What we're going to do now we've been on rinse, we're going to depress the handle again, put it back onto filtration and turn the power back on to the filter. Now we've got the power back on into filtration, what I will do now is turn the heat source pump back on, and we'll complete this process as a bare minimum once a week, ideally two, just to keep on top of your water filter and enhancing the water quality inside the tub. When it comes to that time when we're going to empty the tub, we're going to follow a similar process to what we do when we backwash the tub. So when we go to empty the tub, what we need to do is again turn the power off to both units. The next part of the process is we're going to set the filter to backwash and restart the power. And what we'll do with the power turned off is depress the lever and turn it to backwash. Then re-engage the power. Whilst the tub's emptying on the backwash, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it on backwash until we've emptied the majority of the water out of the tub, just leaving a couple of inches in the bottom. Now we've emptied the majority of the water, leaving a couple of inches in the bottom, what I'm going to do with the power turned off is put it on to rinse, just to compress the media again, ready for it to be refilled. Now we're back on rinse. I'm going to leave it on rinse now, just to empty the rest of the tub. Just keep an eye on the water, making sure that this doesn't run too long with no water running through it. So once the tub's emptied on the rinse, what we need to do is turn the power off and depress the handle and change it back onto filtration. With the tub empty, it now gives us the opportunity to clean the filter basket out of any large bits of debris. And to clean the filter basket out, what we need to do is unscrew this, the white filter basket will lift out, a quick hose out, just get rid of all the large bits of debris, pop it back in and just make sure this is tight, nipping the O-ring. Once we've cleaned the filter housing and we're still on filtration without the power on, now we can start to fill the tub back up again. Once the tub is full and we're still on filtration, what we can do now is turn the power back on to both units. Just a point to note, always turn the MF250 on and give it 2 or 3 seconds before you turn the air source heat pump on, just to make sure that we've got water flowing through the air source heat pump. What I'm going to go through next are some of the common error codes that come along with the MF250 when using them with the filter. As you can see, just for the purposes of this demonstration, we do not have the pipework connected, however, the process remains the same. The first thing I'm going to talk through is the P01 error code, which is a water flow problem. The error code will come up as a display on the screen here saying P01. So before we do any of the fault finding, what we need to do is just turn the unit off. One of the causes for the P01 problem is air in the system. Initially, what we need to do is depress this red button here on top of the filter, which is going to get rid of any air within the filter housing. and we're going to depress the red button until we see water coming through the housing. Once we've purged all the air out of the unit, we'll now turn the unit back on to see if that's cleared the fault. As you can see, the fault is cleared from the system. However, if the fault hasn't cleared, we're going to take our process one step further into clearing any blockages. What I'm going to do on either side of the filter is isolate the water. So now we've got the water isolated going to the filter. What I'm going to do is undo the couplings to let some water flow through the pipework, purging any air. So just undo this coupling, and that would leave that open until water started to flow through at a good rate. We do this on both sides of the filter, ensuring we had a good water flow come through the pipes, exiting at the coupling. Now we've purged any air that's been within the pipework, I'll turn both isolators back on, and once again depress the red button, getting rid of any air in the filter housing. If both of these processes still coming up with a P01 error code, the chances are that your filter is dirty and needs cleaning prior to use again. To change the filter, we need to isolate the water to the filter housing once again. Once the water has been isolated, we can undo the coupling on the filter side of the isolator. Once we've disconnected the filter, what we need to do is remove the paper cartridge from the filter housing. As you can see, for demonstration purposes, I am using a clean filter. However, the filter could always look clean, but what you won't see is body fats in there, so it still may need cleaning. To clean the paper cartridge, what we need to do is submerge it in some specifically designed filter cartridge cleaner. We're going to submerge that for 24 hours in warm water. Once it's been in for 24 hours, we need to jet wash it off, getting in all the cracks, just to get rid of any debris that may be still sitting in there. Once we've done that, we're going to leave it to dry for a further 24 hours, because ideally we want to be putting a dry cartridge back into the filter housing. To reinsert the cartridge, we want to be putting the hole into there, so it sits central. Ensuring that the O-ring still remains around the top of the filter housing. Once we've changed the filter housing and we're ready to connect back up to the existing pipework, we'll just sit the filter in between the housing and reconnect the couplings. Once we're all connected, we're going to turn the isolators and let the water run through. However, because this is now full of air and we've got water pushing in, trying to push its way into the filter, we'll need to depress the red button again to let all the existing air out of the system. Once that's done, we can release the button and turn the unit back on. If once we've done this process and we still have a P01 fault, we're going to go through the same process again by removing the filter cartridge. However, this time leave the filter cartridge out so we have an empty housing and reconnect everything. If this works, the filter requires more cleaning. What I would like to talk through next is the P15 error code, which comes up as a blockage within the air source heat pump. So what we need to do to clear this fault is we need to send the water the opposite way around the air source heat pump to clear any blockages. Once we have the P26 fault, what we need to do is isolate the power to the air source heat pump before we go any further. Once the power is isolated, we need to isolate water to the filter housing. Once the water has been isolated, we need to undo the coupling on the air source heat pump side of the filter. The coupling in between the isolation switch and the filter housing. Now, with this being disconnected from the filter housing, what we can do is now turn this on. Water will shoot out, but all that is doing is forcing the water the opposite way around the air source heat pump. Once we've let that run for 5 to 10 seconds, which should have cleared any blockages, we can now isolate the water again and reconnect to the filter housing. Once we're all tight and reconnected, we can turn the water back on at each side of the filter housing, again depressing the red button to get rid of any air within the system. Now, once we've completed this, we turn the power back on and the error code should have cleared. As you can see, the fault is cleared from the system. What I'm going to go through next is the P26 fault. This is an internal problem where parts of the air source heat pump very rarely overheat. This one's a very simple fix. What we need to do is perform a hard reset, which entails turning the system off for a minimum of 30 minutes, then restarting the system. And what I'm going to do is just turn the power off at the socket and wait for 30 minutes. Now, we've waited 30 minutes. All we're going to do now is turn power back onto the air source heat pump and the fault should have cleared.